The MLB trade deadline is right around the corner, and this Philadelphia Phillies team will be looking to put their final fingerprints on what is expected to be a championship roster, and at the top of that wish list for a lot of Phillies fans is a star outfielder. With Luis Robert headlining things and a number of other notable star names being attached to this team, we're going to break down what is likely for this Phillies team and what names you should be expecting to hear as the deadline inches closer. But Luke, before we dive into these names specifically, I did want to hit you with the question do you agree that outfield is the biggest position of need for this Phillies team to complete this roster? And at its current picture, what are you kind of piecing together what this outfield situation will look like?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, Sean. An outfielder, specifically a guy that can play everywhere in the outfield, is really the most needed thing right now. The Phillies have pretty good defense in their outfield right now. Marsh, Rojas, and even Nick Castellanos doesn't play horrible defense out and right. But really, the hitting has been the issue, right? Marsh really only hits righties. We all know Brandon Marsh can't hit lefties. His strikeout percentage is over 50% this season against lefties. Johan Rojas, I think we all know at this point, can't really hit that great, but he's up here for his defense because we know defense matters. The kid plays an unbelievable center field, and he gets these little slap hits here and there, and he does hit the ball good and pretty hard from time to time, right? He's not the perfect hitter. He's not some 25 home run a year guy, but he's going to put some contact on the ball. And I think we know the deal with Nick Castellanos, right? I'm a big Castellanos guy. I love him. I've just accepted who he is now, right? He's going to have his hot streaks. He's going to have his cold streaks. That's sort of just who he is. So really right now, when you're looking at it, this Phillies outfield as a whole, from an OPS standpoint across Major League Baseball, they're honestly towards the bottom. I think they're around 25th or 26th right now. So there's no doubt in my mind that they need to upgrade this outfield on July 31st.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the names that has been frequently attached to this Phillies team is Luis Robert, who we mentioned there. And to dive into what he's produced this season, 10 home runs, 19 runs batted in, a 30.2% on-base percent, or .302 on-base percentage in 143 at-bats, 32 hits. It has been a bit of a down year for him. That White Sox team doesn't seem to be heading in much of a direction, and he is a guy expected to be on the chopping block there. But, Luke, you don't seem particularly in on this move. Talk to me, why not?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% in on Robert just yet. Doesn't really hit much against lefties. That's something I need the guy that's here to do.
Yeah.
I need a guy that can platoon with Marsh. Obviously, Robert wouldn't be a huge platoon guy, but I need a guy that can consistently hit lefties right now in this outfield. Robert, this season, has only 28 at-bats against left-handed pitching. Just hasn't been seeing them a ton. He was obviously hurt for a little bit, but just hasn't been seeing this left-handed pitching a ton. One, I need that. Two, I think he's just going to cost too much. I think right now, and I get it, there's this whole you have to go all in thing. And trust me, I am all in. There's not a person on this world that wants to win a World Series more than I do. But there comes to a point where you do have to think about your future as well. And if the White Sox call and they say, we'll give you Luis Robert, but Aiden Miller has to be in that deal, I'm hanging up the phone. I'm not taking that deal. Aiden Miller's too valuable of a prospect for me right now. There are guys in this league that I would trade Aiden Miller for. An outfielder who can't hit left-handed pitching is not one of them. So there are some other guys that really do spark my interest a little more. And listen, if Luis Robert is in a trade to the Phillies and Aiden Miller stays, I'm gonna be over the moon about it, right? Like I would like Robert to come here, and like I am in on it, but I'm still just a little hesitant about it. I think there's better options, and I think the Phillies can go in a less expensive direction, and I still think they can upgrade very well there in the outfield.
Yeah, I've kind of flip-flopped on Robert. That, like, I absolutely hear you with the left-handed hitter, and especially with Brandon Marsh as a part of this equation, that is so crucial. What has swayed me a little bit on the chances is the guy is still 26 years old. Like, this is a guy who could essentially be a part of this Phillies core if he's good enough to be a part of this Phillies core, and that is the question that you got to ultimately decide on. I'm still a believer in, and I hear you on Aiden Miller, I hear you on protecting the future. I'm much more of a believer with baseball more than any sport that it means way more to me to see these guys getting major league at-bats and seeing how they play at this level than what a prospect still could be. That for every potential next Aiden Miller, there's a Dominic Brown that we can throw in its face as a guy who did not work out or something along those lines. So I do hear you with that. And also to add to the full conversation here, we did get this report from Ken Rosenthal saying that I don't see them trading for Luis Robert Jr. There also are a couple other names floating out there, as you mentioned. We got this report here saying that from Jim Bowden says the Phillies really want to figure out center field. The three names that have been the Phillies' top priority have been Luis Robert Jr., Jazz Chisholm, and Cody Bellinger. So out of those three options, we kind of got the speech on Luis Robert. What do you feel about the other two, Luke?
Yeah, so I'm not really incredibly in on those other two either.
Okay.
Right now, between Chisholm and Bellinger, it would probably be Chisholm. I was very in on Bellinger before the season started, and now there's just not as much of an interest for me there as there was. I mean, he's a good hitter, and listen, he can get the ball out of the ballpark really quick. But just there's something there to me that I'm not loving from Bellinger right now. I would be a little more in on Chisholm. He's only 26 years old, and I think in a good environment and in a good playoff atmosphere, I think he could really thrive on that team. He's a player that makes himself known, right? He goes out there, you see him. He goes out there wearing the chains. He's got swag on the field. Like, he's an awesome dude. He's an awesome baseball player. And right now, I think he's just in just a bad situation. Like, right? Nobody wants to play for the Miami Marlins. It's that simple. Like, nobody wants to play in a dark dome where you win like 60-something games a year, right? Listen, if you put Jazz Chisholm into a Red October crowd, I think he would thrive. I really think he would. And I think if he caught fire, I think he would be a big upgrade. And he's also not going to cost as much as Luis Robert Jr. right now.
Yeah, a lot of interesting points there, and I think that's a huge part of this equation is any player that you are cashing your chips in for here, it has to be kind of a final piece and a guy built for the moment, that you're asking them to play in some really high leverage spots with the most eyes on them as possible in a playoff setting. That is a tall ask, and we don't have that much to go off for all of these guys. I also wanted to add in this final report we had here saying that, quote, this being from Ken Rosenthal, saying, quote, the Phillies are looking for role players and bullpen depth because they already have MVP caliber talents and top of the rotation starters who can swing playoff series. And for what it's worth, we did see them break a franchise record with 7 All-Stars. How would you feel if that's the outlook at the deadline and they go more for the pitching staff rather than the outfielder direction?
Yeah, I mean, I have been a huge component always of you can never have enough pitching.
Absolutely.
I mean, we saw it last year in the playoffs, right? There's going to be times where if one of your relievers goes down, you're one injury away from being short. Just a little too short. And if you're just a little short in the playoffs, that World Series trophy isn't yours, right? You across those however many games you play, right? 14 something games, you have to be perfect. So it's right now for me, I'm all in on getting another reliever, whether it's a guy down in Miami like a Tanner Scott, or if they're going to look elsewhere, maybe out in Los Angeles. I think a reliever right now would go a long way for this team. Obviously, once the roster expands later in the season, they will be able to add one more pitcher. So one more bullpen arm for me right now is still definitely another priority because I'm still in the same boat that you just can never have enough pitching.
Yeah.
I would rather them trade for guys and them have an excess amount of good bullpen arms down in the minor leagues before they go overboard on the lineup, right? You are so close in baseball to an injury on the mound that it's just anything can happen at any given day. So I would not be opposed at all to one more bullpen arm.
Yeah, absolutely with you there, and it doesn't have to be an either-or decision. They can do both. They can still upgrade the outfield and get a pitcher if they can find the assets to make it happen there. The final point that I want to bring up back to the outfield conversation, Whit Merrifield, man. it felt like it was brought in that he was supposed to be this guy, this utility player that can play all over the place. It just hasn't come together. And the human being side of me, I feel bad for Whit that he's trying out there. This isn't a guy who like doesn't want to succeed or anything like that. I do think he cares. I do think he's competing. But the reality is he just hasn't been good enough. Do you think there could be a turnaround for Whit Merrifield, or is it time to pursue other options for sure at this point?
Yeah, I don't see much. I don't see much of a turnaround, and it's unfortunate. I've always liked Whit. I always thought he was a great baseball player. I mean, 2019 he hit 302. I mean, if you go look at his stats like down from the years, it's honestly bizarre like what happened. And honestly, I really just think he got so in his head that he wasn't an everyday starter anymore. I mean, he played 145 games for the Blue Jays last year and had a batting average over 270. Like he's always just been a consistent hitting player, and he just came here and it just didn't work out. I think it's as simple as it is. I think it's one of those signings that you have to just say it didn't work out. Like it didn't work. I still don't think it was the wrong signing at the time. Like at the time, I thought you were getting Whit for a pretty good price. And with the state of the Phillies at the time, that's what they needed. They needed a guy that can play left, play right, play second, play short, play third, right? I mean, the guy can play everywhere. That bat is not there. Luckily, the defense has held him in there. He still plays really good defense. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those unfortunate situations, right? He's a good guy. He seems like a good locker room guy. It seems like everyone loves him. It's just not working out. I don't see them really. There could be a DFA. I still think they believe in him to turn it around. And listen, we've seen it in the past with Rhys Hoskins back in the playoffs, right? Rhys in that St. Louis series back in 2022. I don't think he had a hit, right? All up until that home run against Strider.
The bat slam.
And then after that, you just go balls to the wall. So, like, really, all it takes is one hit. Sometimes it's taken over 50 games now for that streak to come for Whit. But it's just unfortunate. Like, it stinks. I hope he gets back to even half of what he's been throughout his career, but I can't promise anything right now.
Yeah, it has been disappointing, and I was also hopeful that during this like injury-ridden stretch where there was more opportunity for him that he would begin to figure some things out. Just hasn't quite come together in the way that we've hoped. So I'm with you that I don't think the Phillies move on from him or DFA him. I think it's most likely he's around the entire time. We'll see what the opportunity ends up being for him moving forward. But ultimately, there will be some moves to be made at the deadline. So make sure you're smashing that subscribe button to keep in tune with all of that. We'll have plenty more breaking down wherever the direction the Phillies decide to go and any other news that we get right here on Phillies Digest. So make sure that you're dropping any comments you got below, liking this video, and we'll be talking with you next time. Peace.